The Faroe Islands, an archipelago in the North Atlantic. It's mid-June, 10 degrees, and the water temperature is a little lower. The biologist Agnes Mols Mortensen is on her way with a team to one of the large salmon farms in the region.
We're going to take water samples because we're looking at the nutrient content in the water. And we want to take from 2 meters depth and 10 meters depth.
Together with colleagues from the state research company Fiscaling, the biologist is working on a unique project. Algae should help to improve the breeding conditions of salmon. Their idea to create a near-natural habitat in the aquacultures that makes the use of chemicals and medicines in salmon farming superfluous. In spring, she spread brown algae in the water. Normally they grow particularly well in clear and cold fjord water. Whether they also thrive in the fish cage must first be proven.
This is one of the test ropes that we will keep in here away from the fish. We have similar ropes that are going, so all the green ropes you see here in the cage, they will be transferred to the cages a bit later to be used as shelters. This will function as a test rope that we will measure once a month for a period of time.
Agnes controls the growth and fertility of the brown algae. Although they look very similar, two species have grown on the rope. She planted the one, the second has settled by itself.
Good job.
The fish farmers are already convinced that the algae have only advantages.
For us at Hidden Fjord, it's these guys that are the main reasons. These are lumpfish. These are wild young ones that live in the seaweed that we farm. But we use these lumpfish together with our salmon because they eat the sea lice of the salmon. So it's a natural way of taking the sea lice away. So instead of using chemicals or others, we use these guys.
The habitat of the lumpfish is algae. The algae themselves need hardly any nutrients. They are plant-like creatures that occur mainly in the sea. They thrive through photosynthesis. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into oxygen with the aid of sunlight. A unique process that began 3.5 billion years ago.
Algae as a group have been a part of creating this world as it is today. The humans have evolved because we have the right composition of gases so we can actually live. These are primary producers. They can do their thing without us interfering, without us feeding them. And it's very important for our fisheries that we have these forests because they are nursing grounds for our fisheries stocks. And if we want to use them as a resource in large amounts, we have to culture them.
Is it possible to produce algae on land? A large bioreactor is operated in Ottobrunn near Munich at the so-called algae pilot plant of the Technical University. Professor Thomas Bruck cultivates Nanochloropsis salina, a microalgae that also occurs in the sea. Bavarian pretzel salt provides seawater in the plant. The sunlight is imitated by modern LED technology. Every climate zone in the world can be simulated here.
Mostly Almeria, Spain, runs here. That has the background that the domestic ones do not grow naturally in Bavaria very well. In Spain, they grow much better. We could produce there all year round. And in order to produce technically relevant data, you have to be able to simulate this climate. And that's feasible here, so far unique in the world.
The secret of the green seaweed is its high oil content. Can it replace our oil in the future? The scientist regularly monitors its optimal growth conditions.
This culture looks quite good, continues to grow actively, and so we leave it alone for a few more days before we harvest and stress it.
Stress means depriving the algae of nutrients so that they can stop growing. Only when it no longer grows does it produce enough oil. Is this where the fuel of our future flows?
The fact is that you have to have the interest of the industry, which then really has to spend some money. We are talking about tens of millions of euros in order to set up a large plant. I believe, of course, that this pressure to implement climate-relevant technologies will increase in the coming years, so much so that we have no other option. Yes, we know what the climate report says. If we wait any longer, we will be at the point where the climate tips over, and then we can't do anything anymore.
Becoming independent of oil. This idea inspired the algae researcher to another groundbreaking invention. A carbon fiber made of algae, more stable and lighter than anything made of steel and aluminium.
The plate consists of carbon fiber stone composite and is therefore completely CO2 negative in production. And because we use carbon fiber brick, we also need less material, as you can see below. You can see a small granite plate up here. Underneath it is our carbon fiber. In between we have a limestone. This step plate is as stable as steel. It's also flexible. Because the initial tension is created by the carbon fiber, we also have a certain elasticity in this material, so it can completely replace the steel. And we also called this device -E, which then stands for negative emissions in production and operation.
Algae oil itself could revolutionize the building materials industry with carbon fibers made from algae. But the process of obtaining the coveted raw material is still too energy intensive and too expensive.
We have now managed to break up the algae using enzyme-based technology, and we are at the point where we can say we produce enough oils anyway, around 60%, where we have spontaneous phase separation. This means that once the cell is open, we carry out a short centrifugation step, and then we can separate the phases by gravity. This is much more energy efficient in the processing and the subsequent conversion to a fuel, which was already efficient 5 years ago. And whether I make diesel for cars or kerosene for aeroplanes, it doesn't matter anymore at the moment.
The dream of flying with algae gasoline has long since come true. But the extraction of algae oil remains expensive. The researchers are continuing to work on new processes so that it can really replace oil. The Hubertusteich in Köthen, in the former Braunkohl area of Bitterfeld. Here too, scientists are looking for a substitute for fossil fuels, but they're going about it completely differently. As in many lakes, a film of algae regularly lies on the water surface in summer. Blue algae, which release toxins in high concentrations and prohibit bathing. But the researchers are happy about the algae bloom in the lake. At Anhalt University, one of the largest algae research centers in Germany, Professor Carola Griel and her team are looking for the super algae.
It would be nice if you could have a look.
Yes, that's a good algal bloom.
We now try to isolate the sample from the lake here in the algae stem collection. In the lake it comes in a mixture from different algae. And we now try to separate algae here so that they are ready for technical production.
Her research interest is in the special ingredients of microalgae. Ingredients such as proteins, omega-3 fatty acids and dyes are in great demand in the pharmaceutical and cosmetics industries. But algae technology is a young science. Not all the ingredients and properties of algae are yet known. Scientists assume that there are between 400,000 and 500,000 different algae species, with a wealth of colors and shapes that seem limitless. Approximately 10% of algae have been recorded in the first place, and only a few microalgae are used industrially, maybe 4 to 5 on a large scale, and each one contains different active substances, depending on their occurrence and appearance. The big advantage of algae is that they grow up to 20 times faster than land plants, and produce up to 30 times more fat than rape, for example. The researchers are particularly interested in oil. The algae can be cultivated optimally under laboratory conditions. The only difficulty is the high energy and water consumption to reach the ingredients. However, the scientists in Curtin have actually taken a decisive step forward in this direction. They have discovered an alga that could revive the idea of biofuels. A type of algae that discharges the oil itself, so it just needs to be tapped.
We save various treatment processes and extract the oil continuously from the algae practically during growth. This is what makes it special.
An algae filling station that may soon be working on a large scale.
We don't have many alternatives. We must continue along this path. At the moment, this is not profitable. But who knows what will happen in 20 years? You have to break new ground. Here we have developed a suitable technical system to catch this oil, the so-called milking extractor. We have saved 80% of the costs compared to this classic method, but that's not enough either. We must make our algae even more productive. But I'm very optimistic that we will be able to do that.
As a renewable raw material, algae could become a real alternative to our fossil fuels. A French environmental company has already taken advantage of algae's CO2 hunger. Here, algae provide fresh air. In the Paris suburb of Poissy, there is a very special advertising pillar. Each year it can catch 1 ton of CO2, the capacity of an entire avenue of trees.
The performance in terms of CO2 uptake and oxygen production depends on the amount of CO2 present in the air. For a column like this in an urban environment, its oxygen capacity is equivalent to that of a few dozen trees. In industry, where we have high CO2 emissions, we speak of an output of over 100 trees. It all depends on the concentration of CO2 that makes the system work.
The column sucks in the outside air and circulates it inside. 10 kilos of microalgae are distributed over 1,000 litres of water. LEDs in particular still provide uniform lighting.
Future developments will use much more natural light during the day and will only be illuminated with LEDs at night. Our goal is to operate the device 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
The column is still a model experiment in a Paris suburb, but already now a real improvement in the air can be measured. There is still plenty of good air to breathe in the Faroe Islands, the biologist Agnes Mols Mortensen is on her way to her breeding station. In this container is the nursery of her algae. Agnes wears protective clothing because it's about future food. She grows sugar kelp and wing kelp, the superfood of the future for her. Agnes has experimented for a long time with how the spores thrive best and how light and temperature are optimally controlled. Now she checks their growth every few days.
The plan is to deploy these on our farm on Kaldbaksfjörður in October. And so I'm just, maintaining, just keeping them alive and healthy until then. Because of the photosynthesis, there's a lot of oxygen production in here when the light is shining on them. So you can see bubbles on the seaweed ropes.
The algae grow on small ropes. These are later wrapped around larger ropes and sunk into the sea. Agnes's algae farm is located in a narrow bay in the south of the islands. She hopes to increase its production soon. But already this year it was difficult to get enough helpers to spread all the fertile spores in time. It's the middle of June and the harvest season is almost over. Today Agnes wants to go out and harvest for the last time this year, together with her brother and a helper. Like the ground on land, the fjords are also divided up and it's difficult to lease land at all. The rules are strict. Only one user is allowed per bay. If there'd been a salmon farmer, Agnes would not have got a license. But algae and fish go well together. Together with her older brother, Agnes founded a company in 2007 and called it Tari, the Faroese word for algae. Her plantation is only a few nautical miles from the jetty.
You can see it right here now. So this is one of the ropes that's growing. And we have these long units. So if you have the red big buoys, they are one quadrant. We have another quadrant further out. And then we have our seeded ropes in between. And that's how they are growing. It's not just about getting a huge size, it's also about getting a good quality, depending on what you want to use them for. So in this case, everything here goes to food production, so to people, for people to eat. So quality is the most important part. We learn new things every season, and I think we have done all the mistakes that can be done. So we're getting there.
Because the small boat with which they normally catch the algae is damaged, someone has to get into the water, and that's 8 degrees.
Yeah. He's going to because we have tied our growing ropes in between, so he's going to, loosen one at a time. It's a nice place to be working because it's very close to land, and so the operation is not so demanding. We're testing our farm site for bacteria, for example. So we want to make sure that the food we sell is not infected with E. coli or bacteria of that kind that can be harmful for people to eat.
The algae must be removed from the water by mid-June at the latest. The later it gets, the more polluted they become, colonized by bacteria, but also by other organisms. This does not make them unusable, but then they no longer meet Agnes's high food quality standards.
Take one of the bigger ones. It's good. It's salty. And then it's a little bit, maybe a little bit spicy, yeah. And it also has a texture that you can chew. Yeah.
The algae are rich in iodine, magnesium, calcium and proteins. But are they also the answer to the big nutritional questions of the future? Agnes wants to triple the harvest next year, but there's still a shortage of staff and money. But she rejects a big investor. She wants to keep her independence and wait and see how strong the company can grow on its own. Microalgae are very adaptable. They grow much faster than plants on land, and especially fast when it's warm and they have a lot of nutrients at their disposal, like here on the Brittany coast. Actually, this green algae is non-toxic. However, if it is washed ashore and dies, it produces toxic hydrogen sulfide. But where does that come from? Why is there such a big algae plague here?